Welcome, book lovers, to another episode of Storytime, brought to you by Timothy Bateson. Each episode features the work of an awesome author from the fantasy, urban fantasy, or science fiction genre. This time, I'm excited to bring you Under a Hunter's Moon by urban fantasy author me. So, without further ado, it's time to pull up a chair and plug in your headphones, because Storytime begins in 3, 2, 1. Chapter 1. October 31st, 2013. A janitorial closet served as my hiding place until the museum staff locked up for the night. The simple lock disengaged in seconds, and I made my way down the corridor. A solid oak door blocked my progress as I reached into a backpack. It presented a challenge, but I resolved not to be defeated. Pulling out my lock-picking tools, I set to work. I glanced over my shoulder a couple of times, thinking I heard movement from around the corner. The night guard was making her rounds, and I wanted to avoid running foul of her. If she discovered me so close to obtaining my target, it would be disastrous. Less than a minute after starting, the tumblers clicked into place. I eased the door open, slipping into the room housing the touring exhibition. Green light from the emergency exit sign cast a pale glow over my shoulder. I shouldered my backpack as I folded a piece of paper and placed it between the deadbolt and the strike plate, preventing the lock from engaging. I tested the door, and it required more than a casual effort to push open, more than satisfactory. The door opened into the rear of an exhibition room. Dim overhead lights shone down on several displays. Moonlight shone through the honeycombed skylight, causing filaments of shadow to overlay the displays, a little like dark cobwebs. The clouds were so wispy that there was little chance of them obscuring the moon. The displays highlighted various predators and prey of Washington. Different lighting effects created a feel of the wilderness and unsettled the nerves of the average visitor. Years of hunting at night, however, meant that I wasn't even the least fazed. I glanced around, getting my bearings, and took in the life and death struggles that surrounded me. To the left, a rabbit ran from a cougar. To the right, several pheasants flew from bushes, pursued by a raging boar. Despite the familiarities of the other scenes, it was the central display that caught my attention. The woodland recreation was so realistic that I detected the scent of dampness in the soil. 2 hunters hid in the bushes, pointing their rifles at a third figure. Though she wasn't human, I knew both aspects of her nature, human and wolf. Her wolf form was posed as if running from hunters. As I reached out to touch her paw, I remembered how things had turned out on the night portrayed. My fingers contacted perfectly preserved fur, and the sensations flooded back from that Halloween night. The air turned damp, and the scent of the forest after a rainfall filled my nostrils. The sensation of grass and mud between my toes. Tears welled up, blurring my vision, and memories came flooding back. As I looked up through the skylight, the moon became fuller and brighter, a hunter's moon that shone through the trees. The room faded. Chapter 2. October 31st, 2001. The wolf lay panting for a moment before rising unsteadily. An old injury often made her transformations painful. On this occasion, it left her breathless for a few moments. I gave her time to gather herself, trying to ignore the scent of alcohol that wafted up with her every exhalation. Thanks to the lupine heritage I shared with this woman, my ability to distinguish odours was sharper than the average human's. It made it easier to pick out the aroma of her favourite whiskey. I glanced over my shoulder, making sure our clothing would not be spotted by the casual observer. I fought back a stab of shame at their poor condition. Shapeshifters often wore loose clothing, but my mother had been buying from thrift stores ever since my father abandoned us. It would break her heart if she knew just how much teasing I endured from the other members of the gang, but I loved her regardless. My companion gave me a silent nod, and I started my own shift into wolf form. I dropped to all fours and rose to my fingers and toes. My joints and muscles rippled as my entire physiology changed in a process I have never understood. As my transformation finished, my perceptions of the world both narrowed and expanded at the same time. While my sense of smell had always been sharp, my wolf form was aware of a wider range of scents than my human form. The scent of the female beside me became as identifiable as her facial features and the red tints in her coat. My wolf eyes were unable to pick out the same range of colours as my human eyes would have. Reds had shifted into a muddy blur, yellows into creams, and blues were more vibrant. The reduced colour depth didn't pose a problem since I was far more attuned to the slightest movements around me. I looked up between the overhead branches and saw the clouds part, revealing a clear disk full of light. The moon shone down on the damp grass, causing it to glisten. I had often gone hunting under the full moon. It had made seeing the prey a little easier, and I loved spending the time in wolf form. But tonight was also Halloween, and a blue moon, the second full moon of the month. There was no choice about changing to wolf form. The hunter's moon, the one time of the year that a lupine could not avoid eating a beast. I stretched out my limbs and pawed at the ground, revelling in the sensation. I had skipped dinner in anticipation of tonight's hunt, and my stomach tightened at the thought of biting into juicy prey. If we didn't manage to catch anything, I would be going hungry until breakfast, and my stomach growled at the thought. My companion had several years on me, but she was as eager to hunt as I. The speed with which she accelerated from a standing start belied her injury. Her manoeuvre was unexpected, and I would have found myself running in her wake if I hadn't picked up my own pace. We both kept ourselves in good running form, and my youth was a definite advantage. I pulled alongside her flank in a few long paces, both of us alert for signs of movement or other hints of prey. Killing an animal the size of a small deer would leave too much meat. Instead, we planned on catching something smaller. Our target might be more elusive, but it would make a more manageable meal. We ran for several miles before picking up the scent of suitable prey. I caught a brief flash of movement off to my right, and watched as the rabbit darted across the trail, and I slowed a little. My companion caught the hint and turned a little ahead of me as I turned on the rabbit's other side, so the two of us ended up flanking it. We harried our prey hard, snapping at its hindquarters. Several times it tried to evade us, and we adjusted our tactics to accommodate. The chase ended as our prey ducked into the hole at the base of a burnt-out stump, leaving us standing there, exhausted, chests heaving. The sound of a pump-action rifle round being chambered brought my mind back to the clearing. I watched my companion's head snap around towards the source of the noise. I was unable to see the hunter, but I had pinpointed his location. The sound gave away his position, even though his scent remained hidden from me. The wind direction shifted, and I realized he wasn't alone. I smelled at least two of them now, the scents of gun oil, leather, and sweat drifting toward me on the breeze. I tried to spot the second hunter. As I did, my companion began moving forward. 1, 2, 3 long strides towards the first hunter, and then she gathered herself to leap into the brush. Every story featured on Storytime appears with the author's permission. If you have enjoyed this sample of Under a Hunter's Moon by me, then be sure to check out the show notes. Follow the links to purchase your own copy and find out what happens next. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you never miss an episode.